change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. I mean, and Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
WESN.
Apologies, Sean Michael Smollett, this is Talking Point on WSND Content Capital from the Sister Isle, having to face some perspective last night, being reminded, hey, not everything in the 21st century is going to work perfectly. There's a report in today's papers about two recent voltage dips or fluctuations in the power supply, one on the 25th and one yesterday at 2 p.m. But this is with regards to, I'm not entirely sure if they necessarily described what it was, separate faults between circuits between Brechin Castle and Point Lisas. Well, I don't know if it had anything to do with what happened along Milford Road last night, but one of the strangest power outages that I was ever a part of from where I was staying, which is close to Sherburne Road. I don't know if it affected businesses along Sherburne Road. All the way down Milford Road in patches. It was a very different kind of power outage that at some points, as you're driving along and saying, oh, well, look, here's power, but there doesn't have power. But then a place after that has power, but then another place doesn't have power. It did. The paranoid part of my brain did wonder, is there something more to this? Because remember that big power outage that happened a couple of years ago? There were concerns, I don't know if they were ever proven, that maybe it was interference on the level of a security threat as opposed to just some kind of random accident that somehow took out half the nation's power grid one afternoon. So it's just one of those things where even in a time where there's a state of emergency with an apparent threat to national security, mundane problems happen. And the real issue, right, the non-paranoid part of my brain was wondering last night, what kind of Swiss cheese electrical grid do we have here that will cause patches of it, almost like a checkerboard pattern along Milford Road? Sometimes it's this side of the road has power and that side does not. And then a few feet down the road, it's reversed. And it made no rhyme or reason. Usually you would think, okay, power goes out and it'll go out on the grid in a more systemic way. Not necessarily in between points of somehow electricity flowing. You will have darkness, complete darkness. So I was wondering, is this maybe a sign of potentially poor long-term planning? Or maybe it was just a sign of how the area developed and ICNTT, to meet the needs of the area, was more or less kind of chasing the tail of what buildings went down and what new development came up. So all of a sudden you have houses in this area that wasn't there before, and you have to figure out a way to patch them into the grid, and so on and so on. And again, was it done the best way or not? I don't know. But it then leads to the next question of, are there vulnerabilities to the system that the system can't necessarily bear? And now that we've reached a point, and this is the key, we've reached a point where we have issues about getting money to pay for things that we need and that we want. There's a lot of things that we want, and I don't know if there's enough people willing to say, hold on, that's not necessarily what we need. Regardless, the budget upcoming, it's not going to be an easy situation. And we are left to wonder, what other maintenance issues are we going to have? What other maintenance issues are we going to have? And how much is it going to cost us if those chickens come home to roost? Because let's not forget, I have always said with regards to WASA, it was technically a campaign promise. I understand why they went ahead with it. Despite the fact that I disagreed with how they did what they did or what they did. I'm not entirely sure. We don't have all the details, so I can't make a definitive statement on that, right? It could just be that I would have agreed with what they did, but not necessarily how they did it. But I don't know for sure. But I understand why they did it, and I have to at least acknowledge and appreciate that fact. Meanwhile, another campaign promise is with regards to the 10% starting point for public servants' wage negotiations. So the Prime Minister is basically, the headline is, we are looking for the money, or part of the headline, right? The government can't necessarily give a time frame or a timeline to cement any details on when this might get done, which is not surprising, but it just highlights the fact that this is not like the partnership, which came in at a period where the money was flowing. So if we have other critical pieces of infrastructure, because look, I have seen businesses have issues on the strip. Minor things. Oh, we have some old electrical wiring needs to be addressed, or plumbing issues needs to be addressed. All right, fine. You kind of live with it. And that's anyone with a building, whether it's a house, a rental, a small business, a large business, what have you. That's not brand new. 10, 20, 30 years, you'll start to get some problems. You have a car that's 20 years old, it's going to have a different type of problems than a car that's 2 years old. Our nation is 60 years old. There are going to be things, we already lament on road maintenance, right? Every now and then, WASA has to shut down a plant, a major plant for emergency maintenance. We take it for granted in 2025, most of us, some of us, we will get water, reasonable access, we will have electricity. The thing is, I don't know if we could function that well anymore, particularly in part because we have built homes in areas that may not otherwise have been good spot to build homes without modern conveniences. It's too close to swamps, there's not a lot of breeze, it's not necessarily difficult to walk to get to anywhere. Like, there are various factors. Lighting is limited at night, security is limited without electricity. So when we lose these modern conveniences, it's not quite the same. It's not quite the same. One could argue the environment is getting hotter. And some might say air conditions are contributing to that issue. Others might say air conditions are needed, given the temperature, the temperature increases or the perception of the temperature increases. Because I haven't necessarily seen hard data on what our daily, monthly, and yearly temperature rates or averages have been. So I don't know if they actually increased or not. I just know I think they have. That's what it feels like to me. Are we gonna run into problems now where if we wanna continue with our pre-existing infrastructure, do we have to start questioning how it's been maintained? And if we're gonna have to foot some large bill, not necessarily down the line, but soon, maybe that's why TNTech wanted a rate increase. But as Barry Padarath wanted to point out, we nipped the rate increase in the bud. We stopped it. Okay, that's nice. I hope TNTech doesn't have more issues like what happened the last couple of days. Meanwhile, I'm sure the PSA and other public servant unions, they would like to know what's going on, particularly members. PSA President Felicia Thomas, you know, she's probably holding out. She has said to hold strain. I wonder how long she herself will hold strain with that message to hold strain. Now, touching gears slightly, the former head of SORT, Inspector Mark Hernandez, the criminal charges have been dismissed. Guy Griffith, and this is where it gets interesting, and I do wonder if people need to be careful so that they don't overplay their hand. Guy Griffith described the accusations as a joke. The accusations being, of course, Inspector Hernandez's potential or alleged involvement in the death of the two suspects, Andrew Morris and Joel Belcon, who died in police custody. Autopsy revealing both men were beaten to death. So there's a couple of things to this. Right? He said he expected the case to be dismissed, fine, because he acknowledged, there's a quote, he acknowledged there are rogue elements in the police service. He expected the case to be dismissed, accusing the then PNM government of targeting Hernandez, who worked under his leadership. Now, that accusation is all well and good, because I'm sure to the man on the street, they might think that too, or at least they might have thought of a time when the PNM government or whoever government, doesn't have to be the last administration, but they've probably thought of a time when the government of the day sent the police after someone they didn't like to persecute them in an unfair way, right? But you were the commissioner at the time. And to some extent, how did the PNM instruct the police? Because the quote is the PNM government targeted Hernandez. So how did it target Hernandez? He is saying this in the context of the charges being dismissed. So is he not speaking about the charges? I mean, literally the report basically links the two things together. That is to say, the cause and effect. He expected the case to be dismissed, accusing the then PNM government of targeting Hernandez, who worked under his leadership. Well, who charged him? Did the DPP act under instructions of the government of the day? Well, that would be improper. Did the police who technically supposed to listen to you, take instructions from the government of the day? Well, that would be improper. Why didn't you say anything if it was the case that you were bypassed by a political directive that has no legal authority? Why don't you name names? How did they target Inspector Hernandez? You see, you make a claim, and the claim is fine to the man on the street. But on the very surface legal analysis, it doesn't make any sense. That's not to say that the claim is untrue. It just causes us to have a lot of questions, particularly since you who are making the claim are technically at a point in the chain of command positioned to prevent such a thing from happening. So then we have to ask, why didn't you prevent such a thing from happening? If it was the case that the police had to do the investigation because there were reasonable grounds to do it, then can you say that the previous administration targeted Inspector Hernandez? Like, I understand. I am more than willing to believe that there was an attempt to scapegoat him. It's just that for me to say with certainty that the government attempted to scapegoat him, I would need at the very least a reasonable explanation of how that could work. And right now, on the surface, because we have gotten no details deeper than surface level stuff on this issue, there is no reasonable explanation as to how that came about, to explain to the public how it happened. So then you could explain to the public how it won't happen again. Because to say that the PNM government targeted Hernandez by having charges of the murder of 2 suspects in police custody basically directed at him, that's not a small accusation to make. In part because the government is supposed to have no authority to tell the police who to investigate and who to charge. None whatsoever. That's why the whole Brent Thomas thing is a thing. Because nobody wants to take responsibility for getting that plane and sending those officers to Barbados. But as much as we may look at Suzette Martin and wonder and have suspicions, she couldn't get that plane herself. So I do wonder if Mr. Griffith kind of overplayed his hand here. Because for his version of events to be acceptable, he needs to give us more details. It doesn't work on a basic level. I understand life is not so basic. The reality of politics and rivalries and all of that ain't so simple. The problem is, it's not my job to speculate on how a non-straightforward, complex situation can turn out, particularly if I have nothing to give me any indications or clues to maybe present possibilities. All right. The motion for the SOE has passed. I believe it was just to acknowledge the SOE and maybe the extension. Now, I believe it passed with 39 voted for the measure. I don't think it was all 41. Regardless, the opposition, I believe, voted with the government. One of the things coming out of this whole situation that is bothering me is all 39 MPs present voted unanimously to extend the SOE. One of the things that bother me is the criticisms for the SOE, where the opposition says, well, the government has no plan and SOE is not a solution, it's not a long-term solution. That is literally what was said to criticize their SOE in December. It is very, very strange that the opposition is trying to pass off that somehow their SOE, that seemingly had less practical and immediate reasons behind it, or less specific reasons behind it, somehow is immune to the very same criticisms that they are recycling, criticisms that was used against them just a few months ago. I don't have an issue with the criticisms. I just have an issue with the hypocrisy. That's point number one. point number two, the government is trying to make it out like this SOE somehow is magically so much better than the previous SOE. Like I said, I think the baseline reasoning that they don't want to admit for both SOEs are the same. That the police don't have the capacity to actually carry out their duties normally. So when there's an emergency, like a very high murder rate or a plot to kill specific people, they push the panic button and say SOE. What hurts the opposition's dissent in this situation is, let's not forget now, a former PNM president signed off on it. The thing about this state of emergency, and I understand, to some extent, you have to excuse the opposition because you need someone to be a check. You need someone to be a dissenting voice, to be a disagreeing voice, to kind of force the discussion to happen. You can't just, oh, well, SOE fine, and we all accept it and move on. No, you need someone to, at the very least, be the devil's advocate. I wish they would be a little bit smarter at times, but we're talking about the suspension of individual freedoms. This is a big deal, right? The problem with this situation is because the government is basically trying to say, look, we saw a threat and we put things in place to try to stop the threat. With a threat like this, if it actually doesn't happen, right? Now, you either have two options. You get enough evidence to prosecute, in which case, usually you would have not wanted to declare a state of emergency because that tips off your hand to the criminals. Hey, we're aware of what's going on. We're coming for you. You know, go run and hide. So you would have an investigation, a lot of undercover work, covert intelligence, building up the case, you know, and then when the time is right, you get warrants, you swoop in, you arrest people, you gather the evidence, right? You build up the intelligence to target these specific things and then gather everything up in one fell swoop. That probably didn't happen. They declared a state of emergency. By doing that, by declaring a state of emergency, you announce to the potential perpetrators, hey, we are aware. All of a sudden, they no longer have the element of surprise, and they will probably back off, which means the threat was potentially prevented, but this is the other side of it. If you don't get the evidence, if you don't catch people in the act, and to what extent do you want to risk that? If the potential criminals go to ground and the whole plot is more or less abandoned, we would have potentially prevented something, but we can't actually prove 100% it would have happened. Right? Because we tipped them off, because we basically shined a spotlight and said, hey, you no longer have the element of surprise, but potentially law enforcement was not ready to scoop up everything, to deal a decisive blow with regards to the investigation and evidence collection. So this is one of those things where the government might never fully be able to prove the full extent of what would happen because they had to prevent it from happening. And they did it in a way that could have caused the criminal element to say, hey, let's not do this right now. So we abandon the plans, but because of that, there's no smoking gun. It's kind of like you hear that somebody wants to kill somebody, so you put a lot of police on the street, and they see the police a mile away and they turn around. Well, what's going to happen? And you press the next day, there was no attack. Why were there police there? Well, because the potential murderer saw the protective measures and abandoned his idea and didn't reveal anything in the process, in that part of the process at least. And that's more or less kind of what happened. We put a visible show of force, essentially, right, rhetorically speaking, out there. So now the plot is not going to happen. How do you prove that it would have? And that's the thing. Do you want to let it happen and then say, see? No, you can't. That would be reckless, irresponsible negligence. So this is one of those catch-22s for the government because the onus, to some extent, is on them. while I understand this theory and principle, I can't assume, well, yes, there's, everything is fine. What I just said is the absolute 100% truth of how things go down. No, I myself would prefer that they would find evidence of this plot so that, one, there could be consequences. And it would be a real hell of a thing to say, hey, you attempted to plot to kill people. We were able to stop it, get evidence, and convict you of attempted murder. We don't have to try to convict you after you killed somebody. That really helps with deterrence. Will we get there? I don't know. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll go into a couple of topics in the review. This is talking about the WESN. The Media Ambassador, ASP Arun, should also be joining me today. So there'll be more to talk about the state of emergency. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after this.
Low energy? Heart concerns? Migraines slowing you down? It's time to take control of your health. Join Wellness Unlocked, the series that brings expert advice and real solutions for a healthier you. In our latest episode, learn how Jameson CoQ10 can help support heart health, boost energy, and even reduce migraines. Get the science, the stories, and the steps to power up your health with CoQ10. Don't miss Wellness Unlocked. Watch now on
WESN
and start your wellness journey today.
Do you need treatment for obesity or any related abdominal procedures? The community hospital now offers minimally invasive laparoscopic surgery done by an American-trained, board-certified surgeon with over 20 years' experience.
Give us a call at 235-5479
for more information.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios. But they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
And we're back on talking about the WSN content capital. One of the big stories today, this is front page news in at least one daily newspaper, and I do believe to some extent it's touching on the front page of at least one other, if not all three. The situation that we are in, and I think it started to have been done before. Questions about how this compares to the 1990 coup. And the AG basically spoke on that, I believe, at the debate, and spoke on comparisons of the situation, but pointed out that while there might be some similarities, yes, pointed out that today's threat is very different, in part due to things like social media, cell phones, just the connectivity and means of communications available that allowed essentially the gang leaders in Building 13, right? And probably it might not be limited to that, right? But that's where the bulk of the suspicion is right now, right? But allow gang leaders in prison to essentially be an area where high-level gang leaders could more or less command and control the soldiers for the gangs on the streets, while they're already being clustered by the state, right? So now they are not just commanding and controlling their soldiers, they're also coordinating amongst other gangs, because all the leaders are generally in, well, more on that in a bit, in Building 13, or maybe in other clusters, right? Or at least you have that prison access. So the communications, but also the AG acknowledged, I believe it was the AG that acknowledged, it's not just that they have access to cell phones, because it's also guards are caught up helping with their communications network, multiple ways, getting messages out, but also helping get contraband in, including said cell phones. But then also he pointed out that they would even give warnings when raids might be coming, I believe in order to raid prison cells to find contraband, things like cell phones and other items that they're not supposed to have, right? And I don't know if they'll have hiding spots, you know, in the toilet or whatever, and depending on the investigators, if they find it or not, in the mattress, I don't know, right? Basically sending warnings, so-and-so's coming. I believe it's quoted, he said, X is coming whenever SID, is it? We're looking to read. But then also he pointed out the potential of lawyers helping or being part of the breaches in security. He didn't name names necessarily. But then, of course, there's also the issue of drones, which, you know, famously, that's what they want to blame the cell phones for. Well, drones bring them in because, you know, it's so hard to stop a drone from delivering something. You just need to, I don't know, it's so hard to have someone look at the sky to find a drone. Maybe there might be certain drop-off points. You could start to monitor them. I don't know. Remember, this is prison. You control the movements of the prisoners. It shouldn't be that easy for a drone to just drop phones. Now, this goes into the fact that, as you can see in the lower third, apparently 2 drones, I believe it was, attempted to infiltrate. I don't know how far they got. One report says infiltrated the Army Teteron barracks, right? But the Defense Force apparently intercepted the drones, dealt with the threat. And perhaps it just goes to what I just said. Drones in the sky, like I get it, in a military situation where they're dropping a bomb on you, or that it's an FPV drone if you follow Ukraine war, that's different. But generally speaking, it shouldn't be that hard to detect a drone trying to spy or drop off of something like a cell phone or something. Yeah, one could slip through, you know, but it shouldn't be that you'll never be able to stop it. And to some extent now, at a place like the barracks, which is remote and isolated, once you have sentries on duty, the Mark 1 human eyeball and a diligent sentry just might always be enough. Wouldn't take much to shoot a commercial civilian drone like that down. So now there's another aspect to this, one that I find somewhat hypocritical. Well, I didn't necessarily see this coming. National Trade Union Center has condemned the authoritarian-like incident at the barracks, where the attorney for one of the accused, not the one that's in the papers all the time, I believe, he was blindfolded before being allowed to consult with a client. They call it an injustice to oil, right? This is the quote. Blindfolding a lawyer may constitute an arbitrary and degrading act and could be considered inhumane or degrading treatment. Okay, it would be nice if you would explain, right? Denounce this practice, demand accountability, and restore the rule of law. No local law allows for such treatments, right? So they're calling on the government to do all those things. And it goes on to say that it was added, legal counsel is a sacred right, not a favor. No local laws allow for such treatment. We're in a state of emergency. We're in a state of emergency where the accused allegedly are commanding a plot behind the scenes, organizing a plot from in the prisons, where law enforcement authorities believe some lawyers are part of the security breach. We're in a state of emergency. No local law allows for such treatment, all right, but it's a state of emergency. Also, the lawyer had to meet with his client with multiple soldiers who had their faces hidden either by balaclavas or masks or whatever. It's inhumane, right? Well, here's the thing. Legal counsel is a sacred right, not a favor. That's nice. How did those things prevent legal counsel? There were security measures to deal with a specific threat during a state of emergency that was declared by a president who is from a different political party from the ruling government. This is where now, I'm the guy that says we have to protect the rights of criminals because that's protecting the rights of everybody. But even I am saying this is a little too far because the right to legal counsel was not infringed upon at all. And in fact, a judge even went to say, hey, you'll get there eventually. You don't have to rush it. We now start with this. It doesn't have to be on your time frame. It doesn't have to satisfy your desires. So that was one of the things I wanted to point out. The other thing is, one of the inmates that's challenging this whole situation, Raji Ali, he got a minor win. That's how it's being framed, right? And I'll just like to say, his attorney said, the respondents, I believe this is the state or law enforcement agencies, the respondents have agreed to have discussions concerning the conditions that Mr. Ali is currently under, with the state agreeing to discuss the issues surrounding his clothing, access to toiletries, access for him to order food at his own expense, airing, I don't know what that is, and access to his attorneys and the justice of the peace. Now, a lot of those things I don't necessarily have a problem with. He should get clothing. He should have access to toiletries. I didn't realize prisoners in maximum security have the right to access food, to order food. Not even my family has a care package for me. To order food at their own expense. I didn't realize maximum security prisoners could call delivery. That's what it sounds like. What does it mean to order food at your own expense? Do they get catering? Does catering come to deliver to the maximum security prison? In what world does no one think that might be a security breach? Are you kidding me? Not only, from what I understand, I would be surprised, maybe I'm wrong, prisoners having the right to order out food. Who brings that in? Who vets that? Yeah, this is where if members of the population want to complain that they're being treated too well and they're too comfortable, I can't necessarily fault you for that. But I don't think I've ever heard, and maybe I'm crazy, maybe I'm wrong, you know, maybe I'm behind the times and I have obsolete thinking. I have never heard of an inmate being able to order food. I mean, is it from the state cafeteria? But then again, I've never heard of an inmate able to dictate, yeah, I'll pay for my meals, you get me the meals that I want. Yes, I have heard of inmates demanding food from prison facilities, from prison kitchens. Wasn't necessarily legal arrangements. I've heard those things. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we should be with our guest. Stay tuned.
Low energy? Heart concerns? Migraines slowing you down? It's time to take control of your health. Join Wellness Unlocked, the series that brings expert advice and real solutions for a healthier you. In our latest episode, learn how Jameson CoQ10 can help support heart health, boost energy, and even reduce migraines. Get the science, the stories, and the steps to power up your health with CoQ10. Don't miss Wellness Unlocked. Watch now on WESN and start your wellness journey today.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios, but they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
I am Dr. Delphina Ovid, your friendly neighborhood dentist. At Community Hospital Dental Clinic, we offer examinations which include x-rays, basic oral cancer screening, and a treatment plan. We also offer cleanings, fillings, extractions, root canal treatment, and complete and partial dentures. Remember, you don't have to brush and floss all your teeth, just the ones you want to keep.
Give us a call at 235-5479.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
Our award-winning show is back, and this season promises to be even more exciting than before. What's Up, Doc isn't just a title. It's a call to action for anyone who wants to improve their health and well-being. Join us on this thrilling ride towards better health on WESN Content Capital.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for, it's called loss and damage. And we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region.
Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
Money is something we all deal with, but how many of us truly understand it? What if you could make better decisions with your money? Decisions that secure your future protect your family, and bring you peace of mind. I'm Darren Jacobs, and I'm here to help you make sense of your dollars. Welcome to Dollars and Cents, the show that breaks down the financial world in ways that matter to you. No jargon, no confusion, just real conversations about money, your money. So join me every Wednesday at 10 a.m. on WESN for Dollars and Cents.
We are tackling the hard-hitting topics, some controversial topics, some topics we sweep under the rug. You don't always have to forgive in a relationship for it to move forward.
If it is you are in a situation where you forgive the person, but to the detriment of yourself, what are you really doing?
It is very uncommon for somebody in the younger age group to have dementia.
Atheists don't not believe.
Is that I can't disprove God, but you also can't prove God, so we cannot a stalemate.
We'll focus on the woman who's being the victim,
right,
or the man who's being the victim. We exclude the children.
Folks are trying to study the underlying brain mechanism to figure out how does this particular disorder happen in the brain? How is the brain processing this?
Don't worry about AI, worry about humans working with AI.
Are you willing to learn new skills to stay relevant for the future job market? That's the challenge that people are going to struggle with.
As always, we appreciate you starting your day with us. Let's get into this morning's first conversation.
Is the country's healthcare system more at risk more than ever?
Why it has remained unaddressed for so long.
Political parties get lots of cash, big cash from financiers, and then when they get that now, you can't account for it.
But it's really the specialist nurses who we are in a greater shortfall for.
We can tap into the resources and have them, at least form some mentorship programs.
Highlight our food systems, and which will attract persons from all over the world to come and experience something that actually supports the local economy.
We're lucky that we have a vibrant legal system that allows change to take place, and it's not that matters are just swept under the carpet and discrimination is allowed to be perpetrated.
A lot of people don't know that there were attempts to ban the carnival, suppress the carnival.
I want to get a tattoo.
You really
respond to me. Respond to me how you would respond to me.
The first question I would ask is why.
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say,
services.
we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. So here we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year. Early this year.
Oh gosh.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm nothing to do with that.
I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No.
Let's go to the last part.
We are tackling the hard-hitting topics, some controversial topics, some topics we sweep under the rug. You don't always have to forgive in a relationship for it to move forward.
If it is you are in a situation where you forgive the person, but to the detriment of yourself, what are you really doing?
It is very uncommon for somebody in the younger age group to have dementia.
Atheists don't not believe.
Is that I can't disprove God, but you also can't prove God. So we kind of at a stalemate.
We'll focus on the woman who's being the victim,
right,
or the man is being the victim. We exclude the children.
Folks are trying to study the underlying brain mechanism to figure out how does this particular disorder happen in the brain? How is the brain processing this?
Don't worry about AI, worry about humans working with AI.
Are you willing to learn new skills to stay relevant for the future job market? That's the challenge that people are going to struggle with.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Apologies for the long break, but we do have acting ASP Christopher Arun joining us from Trinidad, from his office in Trinidad. I'm still in Tobago. Chris, how are you going?
Okay, good. Thanks for having me. Good day to you and your colleagues, your staff, and members of the public.
So, I guess we're here. Well, we're under an SOE.
Yeah.
What can you tell us so far with regards to how it's going?
Well, we've seen greater accomplishments in terms of weapons seized and drugs seized, the amount of road stop and search roadblocks. It has increased a lot. We've seen we've been able to manage it properly, where we've been able to issue a number of tickets. Persons are cooperating. A number of citizens are cooperating with the SOE and the instructions of the officers on the ground. And I want to tell them thank you for that cooperation from members of the public.
Is there... Go ahead.
No, I would have shared some stats with you. So you could go ahead and relay that.
Yeah, I'm looking at the stats now. Quite a bit more firearms were found and seized, although most of it are pistols or revolvers still.
So you're actually seeing the use of the hand weapon as opposed to the fully automatic firearm rifles.
Yeah.
You're actually seeing more use of those. So hence you would get more handguns, what we call small arms in the policing.
I mean, yes, that is true. For the year, most of the murders have been with handguns. Is it that the criminal element coming because of the previous SOE and that whole period that also had big events like Carnival and the elections, is it that to some extent the patterns that criminals like to engage in changed or are comfortable to engage in? Because it seems like the rifles disappeared and people like myself are kind of worried that they might re-emerge, and there was at least one killing that used a rifle, and or I think it was 2, where multiple people were hit.
Yeah, correct. And there's always the potential for the heavy arms, what we call heavy arms, the rifles coming back into use. What we think is that the criminal elements recognize that it's easier to hide a handgun as opposed to a rifle and move about easier with a handgun as opposed to with a rifle. So, you know, it's a bit more common sense approach on their part. The rifle, with more police officers on the streets, and you have more stop and searches, you have more patrols, you have increased vigilance by the police officers on the ground. You know, they have the potential of being caught easier with rifles as opposed to handguns. So yeah, you're seeing them what they call you're seeing them adapting to the issue or the environment right now.
Yeah,
And
especially with all the roadblocks.
yeah.
Trying to move out in the public, that's kind of difficult.
Yeah, and then the information that we're getting on the intelligence information we're getting from members of the public and from on the ground, it seems that it's accurate thus far. The commissioner is actually moving with the information himself and taking the opportunity to actually be on the ground with his troops. So you're actually seeing the fight being taken to them.
Now, part of one of the categories are rifles. Would that be more like hunting rifles?
No. You're looking at, well, unless it's considered a hunting rifle in another jurisdiction.
Sorry, it's air rifle and then rifle. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So air rifle is just a small caliber weapon. Well, it's really meant, it's basically a BB gun, what you would hear about, like a BB gun. And it's used really for hunting and sport and target practice and whatnot.
Okay, so what are the things too? Also, ammunition being confiscated, not a small amount, relatively speaking, to the other categories of 5.56. One of the things, of course, also back in the day, I always heard ammunition was expensive, not the gun.
Yeah,
and then when it seemed like though they were spraying down every attack with 9mm, 5.56, 7.62, I kind of wondered what changed. Any hopes that by interdicting things from the ammunition side also could try to limit the use of violence if they don't have bullets to shoot? You know, then they can't be as reckless with the amount of ammunition they expend in each attack.
Right. The purpose of the increase in the caliber, the ammunition that's being used by criminals is for accuracy and basically for meeting their targets in terms of killing somebody, as opposed to 9mm, which may just injure the person. So what you have, and you could kill somebody with a 9mm, just you're going to use more 9mm ammunition as opposed to a 5.56. So it would be very difficult for law enforcement to really control. When I say law enforcement, police officers control the import of that type of ammunition, basically because we have very little control on the border as police officers. So what they see is us on the ground, in the country, in the land, taking the opportunity to, especially with the SOE, to try and confiscate as much as possible that's on the ground already. But in terms of the import, it seems that it is still leaking in, and we have very little control on how to stop that issue. But it will continue.
This is one of those things where the public, and I don't know to what extent you could speak to this with regards to what you just said. We have a state of emergency and the borders are still open. This is not too dissimilar to the pandemic when essentially the borders were still open. It seems like the police are getting more attention from the side of the government and trying to meet your needs and resources. There was a Marine unit for the police. I don't know if you could potentially explain why that wouldn't necessarily be sufficient to, to deal with.
The Marine branch is equipped to basically do patrols on the borders, where you have homes and boats and public access as opposed to the entire country. So like you have like down the islands, they would patrol down the islands because of the potential of robberies by pirates and and people trying to rob the what they call the persons with boats, persons who live off the mainland, right? So they would concentrate on those areas. You know, hopefully with the SOE, it does induce the military to have as much powers as police officers. And this is, and in terms of the military, talking about the army, the Coast Guard, so they do have the ability now to make arrests and conduct inquiries, and also ramp up their capabilities, and this would be a welcome, and hopefully they would assist law enforcement like police officers to control the borders at this time, because now they have, you know, like they have the ability to do that without warrant.
Right. So they could potentially, while patrolling the borders, make arrests one time.
It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to patrol the borders with sea vessels, although
Right.
that would be the best plan. But in terms of inland, you have the coastal areas where the army could or the regiment could actually perform exercises and at a moment's notice to try and catch persons off guard, or use whatever intelligence they have or gather to try and infiltrate that amount of ammunition, drugs, and whatnot coming into the borders.
There's a bit of a controversial issue whenever one service of national security is caught in a situation like what the prison service is caught in. On one hand, they're trying to defend themselves and defend those officers who are not caught up in, for lack of a better word, the nonsense, the corruption, the security breaches. On the other hand, of course, now the TTPS has, I believe, gone in twice. Once to take out the prisoners that were relocated to the barracks, and a second time to raid the maximum security prison, I believe, after threats were made on social media. This week, it was either last Tuesday or this Tuesday. And by doing so, you know, it now begs the question, I guess some people would want to know, all right, we're hearing about potential corruption by some prison officers being involved. Can the police, can you tell us what, if anything, the TTPS is doing? Because I would imagine it would be a case for the TTPS to investigate these things, not the prison service, right?
And the TTPS continues to work with the prison service to deal with corrupt officers who would bring in contraband. But you also have the issue of contraband being brought in via what we call these aircrafts, drones. And this happens at night. We expect it to continue. It's basically a very difficult situation to police on the prison officer side of things, because you have open yards that during that particular time, including in the night, where these drones would come in. I've actually spoken to prison officers who said, you know, you're on guard duty, and it's difficult to tell where the drone is coming from. You would hear the drone, and in some cases, they have drones that have the capability to make very little noise. And it might be costly to the state in terms of 20,000, 120,000, whatnot. But the criminal element who has the ability to access funds is very, very cheap for them. And they utilize these avenues to infiltrate the prisons. And again, it's very difficult unless we have indoor prisons where the inmates remain indoors. There's a roof, it's air conditioned and whatnot. It would continue to persist. And we're fighting a bit of a battle in terms of trying to control that situation. But you would always, and the police service would continue to raid and infiltrate the prison service, the prison, to take away these devices and these contraband that they normally get. And
I think this is just one of those cases where I appreciate that there are some challenges. I would put an asterisk on that with regards to saying, well, there are challenges based on the working conditions now. I don't think it's a situation that's impossible to solve. It just depends on Does the service itself and its leadership and the ministries and the government and the budget want to solve it, right? Because there are probably ways. This is not a thing that we could just say, oh, well, it's too hard and we don't have the money to do anything about it, so let's just leave it alone. This is not like some back road that almost nobody uses, or there's a hole. Well, we'll get to that eventually. This is something serious. Now,
this is something serious and should be dealt with urgently.
And now the thing with drones, though, what I do find interesting, and part of me wonders if the criminals themselves are kind of learning alongside the rest of the world, watching what's going on in Ukraine and saying, hey, all of these different ways to use drones, why don't we think about ways to use drones? Now they're using it in the prisons. What concerns does the TTPS have when a state of emergency? One of the things that you could use a drone for, the first thing it was ever used for on the battlefield was to scout. And you have exercises, you have roadblocks. I mean, you said it yourself. They would still want to sneak around with their firearms to do whatever it is that they're going to do. And one of the ways to do that is they tried having cameras, right? That situation where they put cameras up, not just in sea lots, but also I think it was before where it kind of made it look like it was official cameras. And that was eventually discovered. But now if they could fly a drone to see, hey, is there a roadblock ahead? Is there a checkpoint ahead? What concerns TTP has that the usage of drones by the criminals has expanded.
Well, there are laws in place that we try to police where anybody who comes into Trinidad with a drone, purchases a drone, they must be registered. So that's the first issue we must police. The second thing, we are equipped with, including prison service, where they would be able to capture drones and be able to trace the source of where the drone is being used from. And we ourselves have a unit that utilizes drone technology. And we use that to combat the issues of crime and criminal elements on the ground, as well as in the air. So we have drones that would be used to explore the airspace, and look at the possibility of other persons utilizing drone technology to infiltrate key areas like Parliament, like government buildings, government areas. They hardly have the technology to get into a building, of course, but they utilize drones to probably gather information on police sources, on police working police in and outs, how they operate and whatnot. So, they gather information on us as well. So we expect that.
Your patterns of movement, when you have shift changes, how you respond to things.
Yeah, and to look at the assets we may have on the ground as well.
Yeah. Well, one of the other things that I now thought of, because at least in the States, when they try to have police drone programs, citizens were concerned what might be recorded just when the police drones are going from point A to point B. They fly over my house, they might record me. Now, one of the things that I do wonder, similar to how they might scout police, is there any concerns for the average citizen that drones might be used to support or in the process of committing a crime? Because now, I guess we need to be maybe more vigilant. Instead of someone that might be following us from the bank, there might be a drone. There might be a drone casing out our house. See what we have in the backyard, things like that.
Of course, that's the potential of using drone technology, especially by the criminal elements. There are jammers that could be used. Again, they're the nets that we cast to capture them, and but they do fly at a very high space
altitude.
Altitude. The words escape me sometimes, and we recognize that does happen at times, and it's very difficult. And they do have the technology to zoom into locations and whatnot. So we understand.
Go ahead.
We do understand the technology that exists, and we try to combat it with the technology we have. But being vigilant and changing up your lifestyle and how you operate and your ins and outs and whatnot is very key to combating these criminal elements. We speak about on the ground now. You have the government moving towards revamping or introducing law to deal with the firearm user license issue. And we as police officers have also recognized that different ways, including when you have the drone technology, there are different ways to combat and prevent crime from occurring with you in terms of your situational awareness, your environmental awareness, target hardening, as we spoke about before in previous shows on this program, where you need to change your. It's very unfair that we have to do this, but at the end of the day, we must be able to. It's for our own safety and our own. It's for our own peace of mind that we operate differently at times. So even in coming and going, remember we saw footage where persons would follow you from the bank. So they would line up in the bank and look to see who is taking out a certain amount of money. And then we saw a pattern developing where even they hit about 2 or 3 people, at least 3 people, as far as I remember. And they hit them on their way home and rob them of their money. So even taking out large sums of money unnecessarily is something we would have to look at. I mean, it's unfair that we as citizens have to behave and operate to sue the criminals, but it's about operating in such a way that we prevent crime from happening. So it's target hardening, it's moving differently, it's operating differently, changing your habits, using less cash as far as possible, using the technology available, and all the drones they have. It'll be difficult to commit crimes on persons on the ground.
Now, one of the things that's interesting, you brought up the FULs. There's going to be stand your ground laws. I don't think we've seen them to the full extent just yet. But at some point, people might think, oh, criminals are using drones, because at the very least, it was in the papers this morning, 2 drones attempted to infiltrate Teteron barracks.
Right.
And, at some point, people might be wary of suspicious drones. They're going to have FULs. I know they're sport shooters, but it's not necessarily going to be limited to them. Somebody might look to take a shot at a drone thinking, oh, it's spying on me. Whether they could identify that it's spying on them specifically or not, they might look to take a shot. Just based on what you know, I would imagine that's a bad idea. Just based on what you know with the current laws, why is it a bad idea?
Well, with the current laws, you must follow the laws, which is that to utilize your firearm, it must be in self-defense or in preservation of life of other persons, yourself or another person. So you cannot shoot down a drone because it's spying on you, right? And I'm using the term with deadly force. So you can't use deadly force, such as a firearm, to shoot down a drone that might be spying on you. You might want to utilize another option. As I said, we use nets. You might use a big stick. You might use a stone, but nonetheless, if you feel that this drone is infiltrating your privacy, you might want to take steps to be very careful how you protect that privacy.
One of the things could be potentially to not just have too much of your life exposed. Like I said, a lot of people might take it for granted my backyard is secure. Well, but if their drones kind of scouting it out, and they might say, well, what's in the backyard? How many dogs does he have? Does he have
it gives you right, and it gives you the ability to understand that somebody is spying on you and to take the necessary steps to prevent any criminal action being taken against you.
Now,
and you can,
how much of a risk is it if someone does decide to do this stupid thing and take a shot at a drone? First of all, you could hit the drone it has to fall somewhere, right?
Exactly.
Second of all, you could miss the drone. Your bullet has to fall somewhere. What would be the risks of the falling bullet? Because it's not always clear how much damage a falling bullet will do.
Well, I remember when we were training and for prime tactics and whatnot in the police service, like for the task force. When I was training for the task force, we did survival training, and one of the key issues that
I think we may have lost the ASP just there. Hopefully, we'll get him back just soon. Yeah, this is just one of those things. ASP, you there?
Yeah, you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you now. You froze for a little bit.
We were taught of scenarios where
you're sticking again.
Sorry, you hear me?
Yeah, we're hearing you again. You froze literally as you started to speak on the point again. I'm gonna have to ask you to try a third time.
We were taught that warning shots have the potential of harming persons and property. So we were taught that there were cases where the bullet was shot up in the air, a firearm was discharged facing up, and the bullet came back down through the roof and hit persons inside a house and killed them. And we recognize that, as police officers, we recognize that warning shots that is one of the issues with warning shots, especially in a built-up area. So you have the potential of shooting on a drone and missing that it harms persons and property and whatnot. And there is a risk and danger to life.
And even if you hit the drone, the falling drone, you know, could fall on somebody or fall on something fragile.
Yeah, it could. Yeah, but you would be liable to any offense arising out of that of firing a shot that harms somebody unnecessarily.
And of course, like I could see it now, then somebody will have the bright idea, well, because they might think if I can, like you said, maybe some people might be more tempted to throw a stone, which at the very least would be safer. Or somebody might pull out their own drone and basically try to knock that drone out of the sky. You still have to be worried about the consequences of the drone falling. Also, there's the fact that maybe the drone wasn't spying on you. Maybe it was somebody with a drone and it was flying.
So it gives you the opportunity to understand that there is the potential that somebody is spying on you and to change your behavior.
Right, but if it's not a criminal spying on you and you destroy someone's drone, you would probably be liable for the expense of that drone as well.
Yeah, it could be civilly liable or even criminally liable because there is a malicious damage act that speaks to damaging property or persons.
Now, moving forward, I don't know if there's much you could tell us, because this is one of those things where the state immunity was I've said it before, it was declared in order to prevent a plot. To some extent, I don't know to what extent you could tell us or give the population some reassurances with regards to police actions moving forward. We're seeing more of a police presence. We haven't necessarily seen much of a defense force presence on the roads. Are there, at least I haven't, and maybe I'm just limited, are they out there or have they not been deployed yet?
Well, the deployment of the Army is up to the Chief of Defense Staff, right? And under that SOE, the Army is literally, well, they're literally supposed to be in charge because the order was given by the head of the Army, which is the President.
Right.
So their comments and goings would be unknown to me. However, there are patrols and operations that occur with the Army right now, with the police service and the Army, like JAP patrols and Joint Army and police patrols. But however, in terms of their exercises, independent of the police service, I'm unaware of, and I wouldn't be able to speak on.
All right, we do have a caller from San Fernando. We'll take the call. Good morning, caller. You on here?
Good morning, Sean. Good morning,
morning.
Yeah, good day.
Sean, I want to I listened to you last night. I looked at your program. Able to look at it in the morning. I listened to the caller from Arima, and after the call, you went into what I would term almost diatribe against what the caller had made, some suggestion that the caller made. A lot of things that you said after that, some of which weren't particularly accurate. The prisons commissioner was interviewed by Upashi Tawari Rupnarayan and talked about that television in the building 13 and where it was located and the reason it was there. And it was not in a particular cell. I think you should go back and listen to that interview to understand that. I want to take issue as well yesterday with the Attorney General and the Prime Minister in using the parliamentary privilege in the extension of this SOE and making these claims. He talked about an Express article which they talk about firearms and explosives coming into the country. Right? And tell why he didn't give them any information. The article was factually accurate. So where show us these things? The population they still think this population stupid. If it is that you are saying that is reporting in the papers, and they have the about arms and explosives coming into the country. Show us if it's that you haven't received, you haven't intercepted any of that. The last thing is the Prime Minister as well talked about CPEP, and the reason to close down CPEP was because of criminal activity to deal with crime. And she stated, and okay, fine. She stated, however, that the CPEP employees are still being paid. And if they are not being paid, which means then it's the contractors that they pay that not giving them the money. But I thought they fired all the contractors.
Yeah.
They claim they fired all the contractors. And let me say this. CPEP contractors don't pay CPEP employees. CPEP employees are paid by the CPEP company. And the contractors are paid separately. So stop trying to take the population for fools. Stop trying to abuse us under parliamentary privilege. I have a serious issue with that. Serious issue. Now, one thing, ISP Arun, I want to ask you this. You talked about using force to bring down a drone and all of that, right? What about, again, the population don't have rights. And let me say why. If it is that I've drawn over my property, right? Looking to gather information, or I believe trying to gather information. I don't have privacy rights.
Yes.
How do we balance this issue with the drone, with these people who have their drones and flying the drones? About 2 years ago, a drone was over where I live, and somehow it crashed because he ran into a big tree. And the guy came after looking for the drone, and I knew exactly where the drone was. And I said nothing to him. Nothing to him. Because he had no right flying over people's property, hovering your drone over people's property, looking inside the place.
Right.
So something has to happen. Let me just finish, and you might just finish, and you could say what you have to say.
Yeah.
That's this, because everything in Trinidad and Tobago, when people get an inch, they take a mile. They abuse the privilege. I think it's time that they have laws to deal with people who fly in drones, and to deal with my privacy against those people who decide that they could just fly the thing in the sky and upset my life. Have a good day, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sean. On the issue of the drones being used to spy on persons, there is legislation before since the previous government was in office that they were trying to pass legislation in terms of privacy, what they call like peep and tom offenses. and it is about using drones to spy on persons for sexual gratification. You hear me?
Yeah, I'm hearing you. Go ahead.
Right. So they tried to pass that legislation. I can't recall. I think it was voyeurism. I think that was the issue with the law, that particular law. And I don't think it was passed, but nonetheless, there was legislation before the courts and before Parliament, and I don't think that was passed, and it would have addressed the issue of privacy with drones to some extent, right? One must remember that utilizing a drone to spy on persons, you have the right to privacy, but it's a civil right. So if you take criminal action against a civil intention, where somebody is potentially just for the purpose of sport flying a drone and they're in a built-up area, and obviously they have no other place to pass the drone except over your property, they may not necessarily be breaching your privacy. So it's a civil right you have to privacy, and you could take the person to court in terms of your constitutional right. In terms of law enforcement using a drone to gather information on you, they may have a warrant that a judge and with the SOE now, they may not need a warrant to gather information using a drone, and you may potentially cause yourself to be answered a criminal charge if you damage your property. So you want to be careful how you damage property, especially if you believe you have the civil right to that privacy, and then you commit a criminal action to protect that right. You understand? So you have to be careful.
It's like voyeurism. They could be a peeping Tom, spying your daughter through a window from a tree.
Yeah. So
that's not right, but you can't shoot him for it. If you shoot him, you would also be in the wrong.
Yeah. So we need legislation to be passed to address those issues and those concerns.
I think the problem is the immediate concern of, well, how do I get it to stop now for now? And not everybody is going to have the patience to go through a civil action, and you need to know who to take to court in a civil action. That's the other thing. But
and that is where the policing aspect of the drones come in, where you must register the drone. So if a drone is picked up or brought down, then the card is a memory card in the drone. If they're using it for videotaping, recording purposes, that will be able to be linked back to the owner.
We have Diego Martin waiting on the line. We'll take the call. Good morning, caller. You on here?
Good morning, Sean and ASP Arun.
Yeah,
a couple of issues, and my pet subject is the TTPS. I want to agree with ASP Arun that we are seeing some positive actions by the TTPS, rapid response. So I believe that is one of the issues that people are becoming a little bit more confident and giving information because something is being done with it. However, there seems to be a big issue with the internal processes of the TTPS with respect to managing their human resources, particularly with accountability. Now, the recent dismissal of the charges against this previous head of SORT, I think it's Inspector Sergeant Hernandez, tells us a lot. And two critical areas he highlighted in the news. One, the prosecutor might have been or alleged to have, from his vantage, fabricated information against him. And the second thing he said, those individuals actually have been elevated to different positions in different state organizations. Now, if we juxtapose that with the leadership of the TPS now, you see a lot of the same issue that this gentleman is bringing forward. Fabrication of affidavits. How is the TTPS going to address those issues? Because I've seen the Prime Minister and the AG say that the new Commissioner of Police is going to do some internal audits to determine a way forward. Here we have again, and we're going to question, and I'm going to continue questioning the Police Service Commission. Is it time to replace them and give different people with a different mindset to help the police do their internal corrective and preventive action? Because if you have bad apples, some bad apples in the basket in TTPS, then sooner or later it could contaminate everybody, and we're seeing that might be possibly happening. I'll go and have a nice morning.
Thank you, caller. And one could argue you see that in the prison service. But with regards to that situation with Inspector Hernandez, the case, that's a whole separate thing. Former Commissioner Griffith said the state targeted Hernandez. He was the commissioner at the time. Arguably, what did you see or what did you know? But also, to be fair, it also does bring up questions of, all right, who else was involved? Who else might have been unofficially involved? We don't know. We don't know. It also, not only do you have to worry about potential corruption, again, there's the whole Brent Thomas thing, all of that jazz, but there's also the concerns that to what extent this is another high-profile case that did not go through for whatever reason. Right? And now there's no resolution. And the case is not necessarily Inspector Hernandez's case. The case is, well, two men died. And we don't necessarily have a resolution as to how, why, who was responsible, and who will, you know, face justice for that. Looks like that's just gonna disappear into the night. We do have a Reem on the line. Caller, good morning.
The caller spoke about some fabrication.
Morning, gentlemen.
Oh. Hold on, after the call, Chris. Morning. Go ahead, caller.
My take is we have to make prison a deterrent for people not to want to commit crimes to end up in there. This is all I'm saying. And what is unbugging me is that I, the citizen, my rights are being infringed. Because if I had to go to the hospital, I had to wait for prisoners. Yeah. If in traffic, I had to give up my rights for these people to pass. If I'm a victim of crime, there's no compensation. None. And I find that hard. Because the prisoners are getting away with murder. And we, the citizens, have to suffer. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Well, I don't know if, ASP Arun, if you were the one who spoke on this, but with regards to things like traffic and health, that's a security thing. I spoke about it yesterday. The traffic thing is similar reasons. But I would agree with you in principle.
In the introduction of in 2020, was it 2020 to 2022, with the introduction of virtual courts, I thought that would have eased the movement of prisoners from prisons to the court. I thought that was a great tried excuse in terms of having prisoners moved as opposed to just having them sit in a court. In a room at the prisons and before a camera and instead of being moved up and down. I thought that would have benefited the public greatly. But the police service is not in charge of the courts seeing prisoners and whatnot. We get orders to move a prisoner, we have to move the prisoner.
Right.
If it's in the middle of the night, we have to do it in the middle of the night. The caller spoke about the compensation under there is a law that speaks to criminal injuries compensation, and persons can access it. There is an act that you can read that allows you to you go to the relevant ministry. I as a police officer would have had to fill out FOIs freedom of information forms, providing information for persons to get criminal compensation before the board is aboard. And it's for particular offenses like sexual penetration, rape, murder, where the family could get compensation from the state for being a victim or trauma that they experience because of crime. So there is compensation that one could get.
We have another caller, but I'll just say this quick. The access to televisions and the apparent right of prisoners to quote-unquote order food at their own expense. I don't know if that is telling the prison service, hey, I'll pay for the food, you get the food that I want, or if they're getting a delivery service. I don't know what it is. I just things like that does make me think.
They're not supposed to have access. They're not supposed to have access to communications unnecessarily unless they're communicating. I believe there's some they allow communication with attorneys and whatnot, but not members of the public.
No, but just to the point where the creature comforts, and there have been a lot of published things about this, including videos the prisoners themselves gave out. It seems a bit beyond the norm. Let's put it that way. We have one last call on the line that's been waiting. Move on the line. Caller, good morning. You on the air?
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, Officer Arun.
Yeah, good.
So, well done. This is going to be a next long weekend. And while some of us are getting ready to go to whatever different lines or functions, some of us are looking to procure some African wear and whatnot. There are thousands of residents like myself who are all now uneasy because we know that we are going to be bombarded by noise from probably tomorrow night. You know, and I'm saying to you, Sean, I want you to listen to me carefully. Listen, I have been having a problem in my neighborhood for over 30 years. Right? I have written attorneys general, I've written police commissioners, I've written MPs, I've written Minister of Education, Minister of Health. Okay, did I say attorney generals? I think I did. All right. And is it unreasonable of me, Sean and Mr. Arun, after all this time, after all these years, no one seems to want to accept responsibility for failing to deal with my rights being infringed? How long is this going to continue, sir? You have said, Mr. Arun, that there's no real law to stop a bar from playing music as long as they want any time of the day or night. And then another officer is going to say, well, if you get 10 people, then you have a case for the media. What is this? They're creating a public nuisance, and you have to go through this. And everybody, you'll get a different explanation from everyone. And we keep going around. Now, where is the respect for my rights? Where is the respect from the police service to get respect from me by doing their job the best they can? You can't continue to tell me that when the law is this and the law is that, the hierarchy of the police service has to know that they have a duty. If your officers are coming to you every now and again and say, well, people only complain about noise and all, we can't do nothing about it, then the onus is on you now to have a discussion with the necessary people, be it the AG, whatever, and tweak the law. And this is what I'm saying. All it's going to take is a simple tweaking of the law. And somehow over the last 30 years, it is impossible for you all to have done this. Does anybody in this country have any shame? The thing about this also is about the media, people in the media generally. And I'm talking all media houses. They must know what I'm saying here is facts. I'm not making up a story. And the media and all in general seems to be ignored. This is a serious problem. This problem has, on a few occasions, led to violence. Isn't the police aware of that? When you want to deal with crime and you're acting as if this noise is not a criminal offense, it is a criminal offense. Because everybody deserves the right to have peace and quiet in their homes. Why is that a problem in Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica? And then some people want to talk about culture. There's no such thing as culture that is serve somebody from having arrest, especially somebody who is contributing and going to work every day. This is nonsense.
I think you need to understand something. What should be a law and what is the law is not always the same thing. And that is why I would still say culture has a big part to play. Because you yourself said it, the law needs tweaks.
Sean, the thousands of people over the next few days that are going to be disturbed, they don't want to know about what is and what could be. They know. They know who have a responsibility.
But caller, if the law is not sufficient enough to provide the protection of rights as what reasonable people would say it should be, it doesn't matter how reasonable it is if the law is not sufficient to provide that protection, which is what I believe to be the...
Yeah, sure, but I'm saying that the people in charge know they are failing to do their duty. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that I expect the police to tomorrow go and do something that is not lawful. But I'm saying the hierarchy of the police service continues to fail to do what they can to address the problem. That is my point.
No, I believe it could have been here a couple of weeks ago. You don't know that the police haven't brought this to Cabinet and the National Security Council. And I believe someone gave an anecdotal response that it already happened.
The TTPS could only make recommendations. We can't effect law, create laws.
Carl, you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, well, we have to wrap up.
What I would advise Sean to do, if he believes that his civil rights are being infringed, his right to peace and privacy and enjoyment of his property, he can take a stance constitutionally. He could bring up the matter before the court, and the court could address him.
When you say constitutionally, it's not a civil matter that he's suing somebody. It is?
No, he could sue the state for...
sue the state, okay, right.
For neglect,
I think that might be the last thing that the public who are affected by this have not tried. They have tried suing or taking the matter to court civilly. I know of one case where it was successful. I know of one case where violence did happen, and I don't know if it would be advisable. I know of another separate case where police potentially run cover for the noise pollution, right? Or I also know of the fact that, look, think about it this way. For those who are doubting what I'm saying and what other people are saying, smoking weed in a public place is technically against the law. But there are issues with policing that.
Yeah.
Right? So I think the caller, when you ask the question rhetorically, does anyone in this country have any shame? I don't think you realize how, what's the word? The revelation that you just did there, how much does it fundamentally go to the heart of the issue there? It's not the blame to just put on the police alone. Because what I suspect would happen is the police might bring it up and the politicians might not care. The thing is, does anyone in this country have no shame? The reason I say it's cultural is too much of the country accepts it. They either want it or they tolerate it, they accept it, and they don't want to speak out against it. So
yeah, it's like you see with drinking. They can create laws that you can't purchase alcohol until the age of 21. But there's no law preventing them from drinking alcohol below the age of 21.
No, well, not just that. We have basically condoned underage drinking under the table in this country, right? Now let's just call it, say it for what it is. So at the end of the day, culturally, we have the abuse of alcohol in the country, right? Getting drunk, drunk driving, underage drinking, etc., etc. The laws could try to curtail it as much as possible, but at least in those cases, the laws, at least in some of them, were made very clear. Drunk driving, you're going to get arrested if you're caught. Underage drinking, not so clear, not as clear cuts, right? And noise pollution, I think, is in the same place as that, as smoking weed, and criminal law, anti-gang bill, etc., of why we have these SOBs in the first place. So, Carl, I understand the issue, and I think ASP Arun, hopefully you don't get in trouble with your bosses for this, or your bosses. But that might be the last thing to try, to say, I'm going to take the state to court over failure to treat with this issue, because it is one of those things where any reasonable person should have expectations for these rights, but they seem to be unenforceable, right? And in part because, like with drinking, the carnival culture, the fetting culture, the party and liming culture, we don't know how to, in the past, and somebody brought this up, in the past, the police respected the public and the public respected the police. So even if there was no law, if a police officer came and said, hey, lower that down, what would happen? You would just assume that you have to lower it down. You're not questioning that, but it's different now. Unfortunately, different now. It's a whole different world. I don't think I have heard of any successful intervention to a noise complaint to say, well, they only do it for some. Maybe I haven't heard of a situation where I could say that I know that as an example, because that would then imply that the law can do it. That there's some mechanism in the law to do it, but I haven't heard of that. All I get is uncontrolled situations across the board. So it is what it is. The EMA and how FETs conduct themselves, that's a different situation, right? And generally speaking, it's within the permits and stuff. A lot of the complaints are within the gray areas that are difficult to prove.
Yeah, and then there are persons who, if the penalties are fine, they will pay the fine and play the music as well.
Well, right, there you go. Yeah. Yeah, just because it's a fine, it doesn't automatically mean that you, the police, could force them to turn it off. That's correct?
Correct.
Right. So the law, that's one of the weird things. They're breaking law, but they don't care. And there's nothing for you to go further when you meet that situation.
I can't go into the property and disconnect the music. I can't do that.
Yeah. Because then you would be potentially breaking the law if you were to do that. I think the SP froze again. All right. With that said, we are over time, I believe. So I want to thank all the callers. For the most part, I know we didn't address everything. We just didn't have the time for it coming down to the end. But still, thanks to the callers. Ms. Orima, I disagree with maybe some of the details of the conversation, but I don't disagree with the fact that it seems as though the prisoners are too comfortable, right? Maybe it's not all of them, but the gang leaders, they turned their special holding cells, or whatever Building 13 is supposed to be, seemingly into, according to the AG, a command center almost, right? Or one could argue a holiday retreat. I don't know. That's what it seems like with the amount of prison officers alleged to be involved in this nonsense. So I understand that. Mr. San Fernando, I understand where you were coming from. Mr. Digger Martin, yes, that whole situation, there's a lot of questions. I know ASP Arun can answer for the police executive to answer to. Not the current commissioner. I don't know if he would ever get to the truth, to be honest, because he wasn't that senior throughout a lot of it, but we'll see. Thanks ASP Arun for joining me once again. You still with us?
Yeah.
Any last words before we close the show?
Well, I mean, one could just consider that in some jurisdictions, prisoners having access to TV and internet and whatnot are forms of rehabilitation, and it might be illegal in Trinidad for the prisoners to have access to this. It might be worth considering that giving them special privileges if they behave themselves might be a form of rehabilitation as opposed to a punishment, a total punishment. So
the problem is from official channels, some of these situations have been identified as not being rehabilitation, but rather demands. That officers who did not cave to those demands met with dire consequences.
Correct.
So I think, Mr. San Fernando, we might be debating multiple TV situations, not the same TV situation. I could be wrong.
They might have to consider rehauling the whole prison service situation.
Yeah. But that's another tall task where they have to find the money for. That's the problem, right? Everything costs money. Folks, everything costs money, and I know that money might be tight for everybody, but even if money is tight, you can still have a good day. It all depends on how you approach it. Be grateful for what we have. Let's not necessarily be caught up with what we don't have. That being said, remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. Be your brother's keeper. We are still in a state of emergency, so never forget it's nice to be nice, especially when you're dealing with police right now. You don't know what is on their mind, what's on their agenda, or what they potentially are thinking of when they stop you. Given the current circumstances, just cooperate so that we could see each other tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Okay,
WESN.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife.